My husband forgot his wallet at home, so I brought it to his golf club. I walked into the lounge just in time to hear him toast his friends. "Here's to freedom. Divorce papers are in the mail," while a waitress sat on his lap. I hid behind a column and listened to every word. 3 weeks later, he was standing outside my new condo screaming that I ruined his life. I still remember the exact moment my world split in two. I was holding his leather wallet in one hand, stepping into the lounge at the Oakwood Golf Club, thinking, okay, just hand this over and everything's fine. I didn't even get past the first column before I froze. There he was, my husband, laughing with his friends, glass in hand. "Here's to freedom," he shouted. And then he smirked and raised the toast. "Divorce papers are in the mail." I blinked, convinced I had misheard, but the words hung in the air like poison. My stomach lurched, and then I noticed her, the waitress, sitting on his lap, her hand resting way too comfortably on his shoulder. I ducked behind the nearest column, clutching his wallet like a shield. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have heard this. But I did. Every laugh, every casual remark, every selfish, gleeful little jab he made at me as if I didn't exist. He boasted about how he had planned this for weeks, how he'd finally gotten smart, and was done pretending to be trapped. One of his friends laughed and nodded, as if they were all in on some private joke at my expense. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run in and rip the papers from his jacket. I wanted him to see the pain etched into my face. But I stayed frozen, hidden. When I finally slipped out without him noticing, I felt hollow, like the ground had been yanked from beneath me. 3 weeks later, I was standing in front of my new condo, the boxes still unpacked, and he was outside, screaming that I had ruined his life. I remember looking at him, the man I had spent a decade trusting, and feeling something I never thought I would. Nothing, not anger, not sadness, nothing, only clarity. And then I remembered the wallet in my bag, the one he forgot. The one holding more than just cash, it was holding a clue to everything I didn't know about him. I was going to find out the truth. I had to. We met in Charleston, South Carolina, 10 years ago. He was charming in that effortless way. Smile, wit, the kind of guy who could talk anyone into liking him. I was 24, fresh out of college, working at a small marketing firm, and he made me feel like I was suddenly alive. Like life was bigger than my tiny apartment and my modest paycheck. Our first year together was a whirlwind. Weekend trips, late-night drives to nowhere, dinners that turned into hours of talking. I thought I had found someone who saw me, truly saw me. I believed in us, in the way people talk about soulmates. Marriage came 2 years later. I wanted stability, he promised excitement. For a while, it felt perfect. We bought a small house on the outskirts of Charleston, 2 dogs, a garden I poured myself into. Friends always said we were the couple everyone envied. We had fun, laughed a lot, shared dreams. I even started thinking about kids. But slowly, the cracks started showing. He started traveling more for work and coming home late. Calls he said were from clients turned out to be from someone else, I'd later find out. Small lies piled on small lies. He brushed it off when I confronted him, said I was overthinking, insecure, imagining things. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I remember the night he came home smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. I didn't accuse him. I just asked. He laughed it off, said it was nothing. I believed him again, and again. Looking back now, I see how the signs were there all along. The secret phone tucked into his gym bag, the random golf outings that lasted all day. The way he smiled at me sometimes, but not fully, like part of him was always somewhere else. I ignored it. I wanted to be the loving wife. I wanted to trust him. Even after the divorce papers and the lounge incident, part of me kept thinking maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't that bad. But the truth is, I had been living in a version of reality that existed only in my mind. And that wallet, the one he forgot at home, was going to show me the version of reality I'd been too blind to see. Whatever was inside it, I knew it could change everything. I still hadn't opened it, and I hated myself for hesitating. But something told me I had to be smart. I had to wait, because the real betrayal hadn't even started yet. After that day at the golf club, everything between us became a war zone, even though we weren't officially us anymore. He called me nonstop, screaming, blaming me for destroying his life. Like the world had turned against him, because I had the audacity to find my own space. I had moved into my new condo 3 weeks earlier, and every day felt like walking on glass. I didn't answer most of his calls. I let them go to voicemail, where his anger roared and sputtered into silence. I started keeping a log of every message, every text, every insane accusation. He claimed I'd taken half his stuff, that I was spreading lies about him at work, that I had turned friends and family against him. He even showed up at my office once, pacing the parking lot like a man possessed, shouting my name until security asked him to leave. Meanwhile, I started noticing things, tiny, uncomfortable things, that didn't fit the man I thought I knew. Charges on my joint accounts that he insisted he hadn't made. Emails to my work email I hadn't written. And then there was the mail. I found letters addressed to me from law offices I didn't remember contacting, notices I hadn't signed for. I began to realize he wasn't just angry, he was planning. He was trying to trap me, intimidate me, control me even from outside the marriage. And for the first time, I felt real fear. Not for me physically, but for what he was capable of. He was smart, manipulative, and angry in a way that made people bend to his will. At the same time, I kept thinking about that day at the club, the toast, the waitress on his lap. That wasn't just betrayal. That was theater, designed for me to see or to imagine I'd seen. I felt exposed, humiliated, like everything I had worked for in our marriage was a lie. And yet, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind, trying to find some reason, some excuse for him that might make sense. Then came the oddest part. 3 weeks after I moved, while unpacking, I found something tucked in a box of his things he must have forgotten to take. A plain manila envelope, unmarked, heavy. I knew immediately it wasn't his wallet. That wallet was still in my bag, untouched. But this was different. I hesitated, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to burn it right there. Another part screamed that I needed to see it, to know what kind of man I had actually married. I ripped it open. Inside, there were documents, photographs, bank statements, evidence that the life I thought I had was a carefully constructed illusion. He had been hiding debts, secret accounts, and messages that proved he wasn't just cheating. He had been planning to ruin me financially while pretending to be the victim. That's when I understood. This wasn't just divorce. This was a game. And he thought he was winning. I thought I had hit rock bottom when I saw him at the golf club with that waitress. I thought I'd felt the full weight of his betrayal. I was wrong. A week after finding the envelope, I went through it piece by piece, trying to make sense of what I had in my hands. And that's when I saw it. A second set of divorce papers already signed, but not from him. From her, the waitress. Not only had he been cheating with her, he had orchestrated the whole toast, seen as a performance, knowing I might walk in. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a calculated power move. The envelope proved it. They'd been together for months, setting up accounts, secretly transferring money, even planning a shared apartment in another state. I couldn't breathe. I felt like my chest had been crushed and rebuilt wrong. He hadn't just lied. He had been living a parallel life while keeping me in the dark, all while pretending to be the wronged husband. And then the kicker. In the envelope were messages between him and the waitress, discussing how convenient it would be for me to discover the divorce papers at the club. They had planned it as a spectacle, knowing the humiliation would give him leverage in the fallout. Everything made sense now. The angry calls, the screaming outside my condo, they weren't about me ruining his life. They were about him losing control of the narrative. He wasn't grieving, he wasn't angry, he was panicked. And I realized I could use that. For the first time since the golf club, I felt a spark, not of love, not of trust, but of cold, clear clarity. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure he regretted ever thinking he could humiliate me and get away with it. And the wallet? I hadn't even opened it yet. The morning after I realized just how deep his lies ran, I finally pulled his forgotten wallet out of my bag. It felt heavier than I remembered, like it carried a heartbeat of its own. I sat on the floor of my condo, back against a half-unpacked box, and opened it. Inside, I found the usual: credit cards, membership cards, receipts. But tucked behind his driver's license was something I didn't expect: another key card. It wasn't for our house. It wasn't for his office. It was for an apartment complex I'd never heard of in Mount Pleasant. I stared at it for a long time. Then I checked the documents from the envelope again. Sure enough, one of the secret accounts he'd opened listed payments that matched the name of that apartment complex. Rent, utilities, parking, the whole thing. The apartment he was planning to move into with the waitress. The apartment he'd been paying for while still living under my roof. The apartment he thought I'd never discover. Now the humiliation at the club made perfect sense. They had wanted me to feel small, blindsided, weak. He wanted me to run, not think. He wanted time to take what he needed from me while I was drowning in shock. But I wasn't drowning anymore. I was planning. The revenge didn't come to me all at once. It built slowly, like stacking bricks. I made lists. I documented everything, every lie I could prove, every message, every financial transfer. I sat with lawyers, accountants, even a private investigator a friend recommended. I learned how many rights I still had, how many protections he assumed I didn't know about. I opened a new bank account. I transferred my direct deposits. I froze our joint account before he could drain it. I filed reports on the accounts he'd opened in my name without permission. I even filed a fraud alert. And I saved the apartment key card for last. My investigator confirmed he'd been spending nights there for months. Confirmed the waitress practically lived there. Confirmed they'd registered under fake names but used his phone number accidentally in one form. Amateurs. Every night, after the screaming, after the voicemails, after his pathetic attempts to regain control, I worked on my plan. It wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was steady, cold, precise. I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted him exposed. I wanted him broke. I wanted him to finally understand what it felt like to be blindsided. And I wanted it to hit him in the one place he worshipped more than our marriage, his reputation. But there was something I didn't expect. Something I hadn't planned for. The night before I was ready to move, I got a message from an unknown number. A single photo, blurry, dark. It was the waitress, crying, standing in that same Mount Pleasant apartment, and behind her, something that made my stomach drop. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about this situation. The picture wouldn't load at first. My phone froze, like even it didn't want me to see it. When it finally sharpened, I felt the air get punched out of my lungs. The waitress was standing in the middle of the Mount Pleasant apartment, mascara streaked, clutching a blanket around herself like she was hiding bruises or shame or both. But it wasn't her that made my skin crawl. It was what was behind her. My husband was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, staring at the floor with a look I had never seen on him before. Panic. Real panic. His hair was wild, his face red, his hands clutching a stack of papers like he was afraid to let them go. At first, I thought it was just another lie unraveling, another crack in his fake life. But then I zoomed in on the photo. The papers he was holding weren't bills. They weren't letters. They were copies of emails, hundreds of them, printed out. And they weren't from me. They weren't from her. They were from someone else entirely. A name I didn't recognize. A name that didn't belong to any woman. A man. A man he had been emailing for months. At first, I thought maybe it was a client business talk, something boring. But even from blurry text, I could see pieces. Hotel addresses, meeting times, arguments, accusations. Messages that were too personal, too angry, too intimate to be anything professional. I felt something cold slide down my spine. The waitress must have sensed my confusion because another photo followed. And this one sealed the truth. It was a selfie she'd taken from the hallway, showing him screaming at someone on speakerphone. I could see one line from the phone screen. "You promised you'd leave her first." Not me, her. The waitress wasn't the other woman. She wasn't even the second woman. She was just another pawn. Another placeholder in a long chain of people he used to build whatever twisted version of himself he wanted to be. And the man he'd been emailing, he wasn't just a secret, he was a threat. A threat my husband had been trying to hide from both of us. A threat he had gone to extreme lengths to keep quiet, including setting up an entirely fake breakup scene at the golf club just to force the divorce before something else came out. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. His desperation, his rage, his panic, his constant accusations that I had ruined his life. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of being exposed. Because whatever he had done with that man, whatever promises he had broken, whatever lies he had told, it was big enough to make him terrified. And the waitress. She wasn't crying because of him. She was crying because she had just realized she was never his partner. She was a liability he was about to throw away. And now, so was I. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the photos, zooming in on every pixel, trying to understand the man I had lived with for a decade. By sunrise, one thing was clear. Whatever he'd been hiding wasn't just cheating or money or humiliation. It was something colder, calculated, cruel in a way that made my skin crawl. The next morning, the waitress called me from a blocked number. Her voice was shaky, exhausted, beaten down. She told me everything. My husband hadn't just been cheating on me. He hadn't just been cheating on her. He had been running a scam. A long, deliberate, emotionally manipulative scheme targeting both of us, and the man in the emails. The man wasn't a lover. He wasn't a fling. He wasn't even part of some secret double life. He was a business partner. A partner my husband had scammed out of more than 50 grand. And the emails, they were all threats. Warnings. Proof the partner had of my husband forging documents, redirecting payments, lying about contracts, and using the waitress's name to create fake receipts. My husband had pulled her into a fraud without her knowledge. He used her identity for paperwork and used their relationship as cover anytime he needed her signature forged. She hadn't known until she saw the printed emails. And me, I was the perfect shield. The stable wife with the clean record. The woman he could point to and say, if anything looks weird, it's her. She handles our finances. He had set the entire golf club scene up for one reason: to force me into signing the divorce papers quickly before his partner went public or took legal action. He wanted to cut me off legally so he could dump the debt and the fraud trail on me before it all collapsed. He wanted me too shocked, too hurt, too humiliated to look closely at the bank accounts. He wanted me scrambling for emotional closure while he quietly positioned me as the fall girl. He had rehearsed the toast. He had invited the friends. He had convinced the waitress it was a fun prank. He had counted on me delivering the wallet because he intentionally left it behind. He wanted me there. He wanted me to hear it. He wanted me to run home crying so he could file everything without question. And the screaming outside my condo, that wasn't heartbreak. That wasn't anger. It was panic. Pure panic. Because by not collapsing, by moving out, by going silent, by freezing the accounts, I had ruined the one thing he needed most: a clean exit. The waitress kept crying as she explained it. She said he had threatened her when she confronted him, said she was replaceable, said she was lucky he had used her instead of someone who mattered. He was never in love with her. He was never in love with me. He loved control. He loved leverage. He loved the power of having people trapped in his orbit. And the reason he did all of it, the cheating, the lies, the staged humiliation, the fake bravado, the divorce push, was chilling in its simplicity. He wanted to walk away clean. No debts. No consequences. No one knowing what he had done. He planned to let me burn for his crimes, let the waitress be a footnote, and move to that new apartment with a new identity while the rest of us dealt with the fallout. That was the man I married. Not stupid. Not careless. Not emotional, calculating, predatory, cold. And now that I understood exactly how deep his cruelty went, the last piece of my plan snapped into place. He wanted freedom. He wanted a clean escape. He wanted the world to believe he was innocent. I was about to take all of that away from him, slowly, legally, and with proof he couldn't talk his way out of. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. I wanted something cleaner than what he ever offered me. Consequences. Real ones. The kind that couldn't be talked around, manipulated, or shoved onto someone else. So I started with the truth. I handed everything, every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every email, every fake account, to a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes. I gave the investigator permission to forward his full report to the authorities and to the business partner he scammed. I also gave the waitress a statement confirming she'd been used, her identity stolen without her knowledge. Then I did something I knew would cut him deeper than all of it combined. I filed for divorce again, this time with full evidence, and I listed fraud and marital misconduct as the grounds. The moment the paperwork hit his mailbox, he exploded. He showed up outside my condo again, pounding on my door, screaming that I was ruining everything. But this time, I had already alerted police. They showed up before he could escalate. Watching him get forced back from my door, watching his face twist when the officers asked him to leave, was the first breath of real peace I'd felt in months. And then the real avalanche hit him. His business partner filed charges. The company launched an internal investigation. Financial fraud, identity misuse, falsified documents. Every piece of evidence I handed over landed exactly where it needed to. The Mount Pleasant apartment. The management company discovered he'd registered under fake information. They reported him. The waitress, she gave her statement. Loudly, clearly, and with legal representation. Within weeks, he lost his job. Within a month, his accounts were frozen. Within 2 months, he was juggling criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the divorce he had tried to weaponize against me. When I saw him last, he wasn't screaming. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't even angry. He was small, quiet, shrunken. He stood in the courthouse hallway with a public defender and wouldn't look at me. Not once. The judge awarded me the house he'd abandoned, compensation for the fraud he attempted to pin on me, and full legal protection. He walked out with nothing but a court date and the reality he couldn't charm his way out of. As for me, I rebuilt. Slow, steady, intentional. My condo became peaceful. My bank accounts became mine again. My sleep became quiet. Sometimes I think about that night at the golf club, the toast, the laughter, the fake confidence. I remember how he lifted his glass and said, "Here's to freedom." Funny thing is, he was right. There was freedom waiting. It just wasn't his. It was mine.